Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chase Hugo.
And I'm Zach Cox, and you're watching Channel 5 News at Night.
A case recently brought to the Supreme Court, the New York Times versus the United States. The parties involved here are the Nixon administration, the New York Times, and the Washington Post.
Correct. So, on June 13th, 1971, the Pentagon Papers were published, which included information on how Harry S. Truman's administration gave military aid to France in its colonial war against Viet Minh, something like that. The New York Times obtained these Pentagon Papers when military analyst Daniel Ellsberg was opposed to the war and wanted to publish what was going on.
Now, how it reached the Supreme Court is the lower courts appealed it, and it put the national security at risk. So,
Correct.
They were tossing around whether it was going against the First Amendment.
Right.
And, I guess they just couldn't figure it out, so they went to the Supreme Court.
On June 26, 1971, and it was located in New York. Now, before we give you the verdict, we're going to let the plaintiff and the defendant give you some more information on the case.
Yep, let's go to them.
Let's go to them. Tom? Who are you representing today, sir?
Well, I'm representing the United States of America.
Okay, and how does the United States of America feel its rights are violated?
Well, basically, the First Amendment does not guarantee that your freedom of speech and your freedom of press is absolute. So what that means is, if you are putting national security at risk, which the New York Times did, then we can't allow that to happen. We got to stop that right there. Because if we allow the New York Times to do it, then other people are going to get by with it, and we're just going to be threatening the national security. Now, our job as a government is to protect the people, okay? And when the government is at risk, that means the people are at risk. And we have to protect ourselves and the people, and we just can't allow ourselves to be threatened.
Is that all you have to say today, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Who are you representing?
I'm representing the New York Times.
How were your rights not violated in the case between the United States and the New York Times?
Well, let me tell you. I have all the facts I need written down right here in my big green book. Let's get started, shall we?
Yes, sir.
First off, the First Amendment guarantees freedom of the press. I believe that is true. Can you verify that?
I think that's true.
Thank you, sir. Next off, the press needs to inform the American people. That is also a true statement, I believe.
I would also think that's very true.
Now, when the government can't inform the people, who should do it?
Well, I think you rely on the press.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. That's all I need you to say. And in finishing touches, the government did not actually say how publishing the Pentagon Papers put us in national risk or our security was flanked.
I see.
Therefore, that's my arguments.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Mr. Plaintiff and Defendant. Looks like the justices have come to a conclusion and a verdict.
Yes, they have.
Drum roll, please.
The justices ruled the case in favor of the New York Times 6-3.
Woo!
Yep.
Sweet.
New York Times won that one, baby.
Congrats, New York Times.
Congrats.
Mr. Chase, would you like to give us information on the majority opinion?
Yes, I would. The case between the United States and the New York Times was voted on a 6-justice majority opinion. Those 6 justices include Hugo Black, William Douglas, Potter Stewart, Byron White, Thurgood Marshall, and William J. Brennan. Now, the one who wrote this opinion has not been identified, but all 6 justices concurred on this opinion. The major points were it was a violation of the First Amendment right, it's up to the executive branch to keep their secrets, the executive cannot suppress freedom of expression, and the separation of powers does not permit the executive to make laws just for convenience sake.
Good report, Mr. Chase. That was good.
Thanks.
Pretty solid.
Well, why don't we go, why don't you give us some information on the dissenting opinion?
Sure will. The dissenting opinion vote count was 3, considering the majority opinion vote count was 6, and the final vote was 6-3. The 3 justices that voted for the dissenting opinion were John Harlan, Harry Blackmun, and Warren Burger. The person who wrote the minority opinion is not identified, just like the majority opinion was not identified. Major points for the dissenting opinions were free and unfettered press, meaning it would be free of restraint. An effective, more complex government. It gave the press more absolute privileges, and the Pentagon Papers would lead to battlefield casualties and diplomatic difficulties. All justices concurred.
Thanks for that, Zach.
Hey, you're welcome, Chase.
Now, the significance of this case is pretty important because it basically set the line for what the press could do and set for what the freedom of press actually means, you know?
Right, correct. No, I agree. And I also say how relevant it is today because we see the press posting all this stuff all the time, really no restraint or care what they say.
Right, no filter.
No filter, other than the required filters.
Right.
So they go to the line, is
Right.
another way of saying it.
Well, that's all we have for today. Thanks for joining us at Channel 5 News.
Thank you for watching tonight.